The Course Consultant. My name's Melody, and I am the founder of The Course Consultant. I help membership owners and group coaching program founders grow their recurring revenue for their membership or coaching program through referrals and retention. And today I am going to bring on a very special guest during this training episode, specifically as it relates to podcasts. Now, what is it that's so important about podcasts, and why do I talk about podcasts? Especially if I am somebody who helps people with group coaching programs and founders. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about why it's so important to diversify your income with different income streams. But I also want to tell you that if you have a podcast, which most people with a membership or a group coaching program, it's really important to look at ways that you can strategize your overall brand to get more income into the new year. So if you're on the idea of, I want to plan out a really profitable 2022, 2023 season, then this training is going to be super, super useful. So I'm actually going to bring on a special guest, and we are going to talk all about why it's important to look at ways to land sponsorship for your podcast and some strategic steps to do that. So today I am welcoming on a very special guest, Danielle. Danielle, thank you so much for being on today's show. I'm super excited to have you. Tell us a little
Melody,
bit.
likewise.
Yeah,
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about how you have seen your income streams really diversified over the last few years. And then obviously introduce yourself, because I know that some people are already familiar with you on my channels, but maybe some people just hopped on and they said, oh, who's this person?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Danielle Desir Corbett. I am a membership owner, a podcast host, a podcast marketing coach, an author, speaker. I wear a lot of hats, but I'm very passionate in particular about helping podcasters grow and also monetize, specifically through sponsorships. As a podcaster with over 4 years experience, I've tried a lot of different income models. For example, buy me a coffee and Patreon. I've tried hosting workshops. I've tried courses. I've tried sponsorships and affiliate revenue. And those have been, for me, the money makers. So I've leaned into those primarily over the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to deciding on how to diversify your income, you and I both have digital products. And so it's not always the question of what's going to be the only type of way for people to work with you, but how can you work with people at different price points and at different types of packages. And so I think that sponsorship just make a whole bunch of sense, especially if you do want that flexibility and you love creating. So today we're going to be talking all about how to land sponsorships for your podcast. I'm here joined by Danielle Desir Corbett, founder of WC Podcasters, author, speaker, coach, mentor, podcast guru, whatever you want to call yourself. And I'm so excited to talk about these strategic tips to help you land sponsorship. So one of the things that I had a question about, Danielle, is what if people are listening today and they're thinking to themselves, Danielle, I have a small podcast. I don't know if I can actually ask for sponsors yet. I maybe have just a couple thousand downloads. I feel like I'm not sure if someone would pay money. So, what would you say to that person who's maybe thinking about doing sponsorships, but they have a really growing audience, but it's not necessarily, hundreds of thousands of downloads yet?
Yes, what I'd say is that brands absolutely want to work with you because you are nurturing and growing an audience that these brands actually have a difficult time reaching and connecting to, because brands are like companies. They're not personal like me and you, mostly, and they're not making these one-to-one connections. They're not necessarily sharing their ups and downs and being vulnerable and a little messy like we are as personal brands and as podcast hosts. So we bring something really valuable to the table by being able to bring all of these people together who have a very similar interest, and these brands are really trying to connect with those people. a lot of podcasters I've seen who are successful, they don't have millions of downloads. They have an audience that's engaged, that if they say, hey, listen, why don't you check this out? This would be a really great resource. They will actually go and check that out. They're curious because of that know, like, and trust. And again, you're following up with them week after week, giving them amazing, valuable, free content, things that brands struggle with. So I would say that, brands do want to work with you. It's about you believing in that fact and you making the steps and doing the things on a daily practice, or, just putting yourself out there. I think that is the big thing to consider. I was that person 2 years ago when I felt like brands didn't want to work with me, and why would they even look at me? And the fact is that I actually didn't pitch sponsors. I wasn't proactive, and I absolutely left money on the table because of this mindset, because of this belief. However, after I started seeing pitching and building relationships with brand as a muscle that I needed to flex and practice, I started to see so much more success. So brands do want to work with you. The question is, do you want to work with brands, and are you willing to start working on building those relationships?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I love about being part of the creator community is that you have the ability to decide what your pricing, what your packages are, and also what brands that you want to connect with. And I think, back to the time when I was, thinking about just the blog and not thinking about my overall brand, I thought, oh, well, I have to be working with Target or, Amazon affiliate links. That's the thing, right? But really, it's about what type of businesses that you want to work with. You can actually have small business owners who are someone who offers a digital course or a product or a service that's related to your industry. And it doesn't necessarily need to be big time brands. There's different levels of brands that you can work with. You can offer different packages and pricing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I really love that sponsorships can really be as flexible and as unique as the creator. So if you're brand new and you're listening in on LinkedIn, Facebook, or you're just tuning in, make sure that you leave us a comment. We would love to know what questions you have about landing sponsorships, or just comments or tips that you have about sponsorship tips for your podcast. One of the things that I want to talk about is getting the guts to actually send the pitch. Danielle, I get really anxious when I think about pitching brands, but I know that you've landed 5-figure sponsorship deals for your podcast, and you've also had a lot of different types of sponsorship packages over the years, like your summits. You also have different types of virtual events that you do, and I love that you really help support other business owners in a variety of different spaces online. You had a really great story that you and I were talking about recently on a one-on-one chat, and that was about how many times just in the beginning of sending pitches to sponsors or potential sponsors that you got ghosted. You felt like, I don't know if they're ever going to respond, or they decline working with you. Can you talk a little bit more about that mindset piece of what actually goes behind how you're pitching, and what that felt like for you when you were first getting started?
Yes. So let's do a reframe first, because a lot of times, like you mentioned, pitching feels scary. It feels intimidating. I reframed it to think about pitching as an introduction. It is just a hello, nice to meet you. Of course, at the end of the day, I want to have a signed contract and money in the bank from a successful campaign. But for me, my goal is to get in front of them, to make myself visible, and to see if there's some synergy and we can continue the conversation from there. So it's simply an introduction. It's a handshake. It's a hello. And that for me has melted a lot of the anxiety and the fear when it comes to pitching. Worst case scenario is that now they know who you are, and they may actually follow your podcast and subscribe and keep you on the back of their mind. Best case scenario, you get a reply, you continue the conversation, you land the deal. So that's number one. In terms of me growing as a podcaster who was working with brands, the first onset of pitches I sent, I was again terrified. I sent out pitches. I sent out 3 pitches in particular. The first pitch, I got no response. I was like, oh, this sucks. The second pitch, I got a response. I was like, yay. But they had a lot of questions, nitty gritty statistical questions, details about my demographics and my audience that I actually did not include in my media kit. So for me, that was like, okay, I need to update my media kit with some revisions. After a couple of back and forth emails, they actually ended up ghosting me as well. For me, I will talk about why I believe that's true. But lastly, I had a brand who was like responsive and they were excited, but now they pigeonholed me into an affiliate relationship. And the amount of work that I wanted to do and propose in this proposal was way more work than I was comfortable with doing as an affiliate relationship. So for me, the first 3 pitches I sent didn't land and I was unsuccessful. And I decided to stop pitching, stop being proactive, and I really dropped the ball on that because I feel like if I would have continued, I would be so much further along as a podcast host. So don't give up when it comes to pitching. You're going to get a lot of ghosting, rejections. However, take every response as a way to improve. Once you have a brand that finally responds to you, you can say, okay, this is my winning template, and I'm going to use this to continue to pitch more and more brands until you get into this rhythm and groove where your open rate is really high. It's also really important when it comes to your pitch email as well, is to, if you are going to include your media kit, to really think about the components from a brand perspective, right? Everyone knows we want to have things like your total podcast downloads, which is wonderful. But what a brand really cares about is your average podcast downloads. Because if they're going to sponsor 1 or 2 episodes, what are they going to be expecting? The average podcast downloads. So that provides them a more realistic picture. So again, these are things that I've learned over 2 years of back and forth working with brands, but you really want to, again, put your media kit in the light of whoever's receiving this. How am I going to position myself and answer all of their questions so that when they do reply, it's let's hop on the phone. If they do reply, send me your proposal in your rate sheet. We want them to move forward and not have all these questions that keep them stuck. So those are some of my primary thoughts when it comes to pitching.
I love that you just talked about how you were discouraged in the beginning and you felt like you weren't even sure if this was going to work. And then you decided to try it again. And you've now landed several different sponsorships. And I love that you kind of talk about that, because a lot of times when people talk about the big numbers, they don't really talk about how many times that they actually fell on their face and just were like, is this even going to work? And so I think that when we're talking about this, the focus of what you said, the gist of what I'm hearing, Danielle, is that don't get discouraged. You have to find ways to improve, get the feedback. Yes, it stings. Yes, it doesn't feel good. But guess what? You can't succeed if you're trying to constantly try something and you quit. You have to be able to do something again, see what works, continue doing that, and see what doesn't work. Because there's a lot of the times when, I know there's a very famous quote, Thomas Edison, who said, I found out a way to create the light bulb. I actually found out 99 ways not to create a light bulb. And so you have to find those 99 ways that aren't working before you find the thing that actually does work. So I'm glad that you found that. And if you're just watching this, again, leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you about questions about sponsorships for your podcast, for your overall brand, and for your business. Whether you're a coach, consultant, course creator, we would love to hear from you. I know that there's a lot of folks who really appreciate the work that you do, Danielle. And we've got some really exciting things that we're going to be talking about how you can successfully plan out a profitable podcast into the new year. So my question to you, Danielle, is related to the finding of sponsors. Where do you actually go to find sponsors? How do you connect up with them in a way that feels right and isn't something that, in a way that feels like it actually works for you? So the question is, where do you find sponsors?
Yeah, so I primarily find sponsors thinking about, in terms of for my brand, what are the products and services that I enjoy using on a day-to-day basis? Because I'm like probably their super fans. I know the products really well. So that's probably going to be my first my first go at it. And when I talk to a lot of my podcast marketing clients, I always tell them, okay, make a list of the brands that you want to work with. We all have a list of like dream brands that we want to work with. Start making a list and you can start pitching those and using that as your first round. Another thing that you could also do is listen to other podcasters who have podcasts within your niche. Because if you see that that podcast is getting sponsors, who are those brands who are sponsoring them? Is it relevant? Does it make sense for you to have them and partner with them on your show? So I always have my ears to the ground to say, okay, who are they working with? Meaning that they potentially have dollars to work with me as well. So for me, it feels like a lot less friction because sometimes actually a lot of brands have not worked with podcasts yet. So a lot of the brands I'm talking to, I'm doing a lot of educating and I'm telling them, hey, here's how to reach this audience, or here's what we should be doing. I'm like a consultant of sorts because this is their foray into podcasting. But if I know that a brand has previously worked with podcasters before, we can skip all this learning and training and all of that kind of stuff because they've worked with podcasts and we have this like relationship and rapport there. So look to see what other folks in your niche are doing. Another opportunity is to also Podcorn or Asa Collective. These are podcast advertising marketplaces. And what they do is that they connect you to different brands. They have a bunch of brands, a slate of brands that they have on their platform. And at least for Podcorn, all you have to do is reach out to them within the portal and start to see if there's any way that you can work together. I really like this because there's no like hunting them down. You know what budget they have for the majority, for the most part. And it's just an easy place where every single week you can go in and they actually send you an email with notification telling you that there are new brands. And it's a lot easier to do. What I will say with these podcast advertising marketplaces is that a lot of times they have a really set budget and they might pigeonhole you into a CPM, which is a cost per mil model, meaning that they might give you on average $25 per 1,000 downloads. Okay. So if that's a model that you want to go with, then the advertising marketplaces may be a good option for you. However, for me, $25 does not pay my mortgage, and it does not work for me for the amount of effort and time and quality of content that I provide to my audience. So I'm really customizing these packages for each of my clients because these brands are your clients, right? So I really take this like custom boutique experience when it comes to pricing my packages. So those are pretty much the ways. I also want to mention when you go to conferences are an amazing place for you to actually find sponsors. A lot of times they have booths. If you are in the personal finance space, FinCon is a major conference, for influencers, and they have an expo hall of brands, and the brands are there to work with you. So make sure you're grabbing their cards, asking them if they work with podcasters, following up. So these are all the places that you can, go to start to see, okay, who do I want to work with and who can I start reaching out to and pitching today?
Yeah, I think finding other types of vendors out there, a lot of the times there's conferences that will actually have vendor booths that are actually rented out. And so if you're someone who attends different types of conferences, take a look at who's actually there. Many times those kinds of are softwares, or maybe it's a business that is maybe smaller, maybe they're a startup, and they're looking for ways to reach new audiences. And so look at the different types of tables out there, who's there, who are they talking to, who do they want to talk to, and then decide, okay, what's their business all about? How can your business actually help support the growth and reaching new audience members? And so a lot of the times we kind of just pigeonhole ourselves and say, well, I only want to work with this big brand. But I do want to just recommend that when people are looking for connecting up with different businesses, it's not always the big brands that will pay the bills. Sometimes these startup companies are looking for ways to also diversify their marketing strategy. And podcasting is just one piece of the pie. So really look at how you can support the overall businesses that are out there. Look at a variety of different places. I know I loved attending Social Media Marketing World, FinCon. There's a lot of different podcaster conferences that are out there, and some are in person and some are virtual. And so I find that the conferences that I love and enjoy the most are the conferences that are very, very all about the relationships. And I love that. And Saskia, thank you so much for joining me. And it was great to meet you at FinCon. Saskia says, very informative. Thanks for having the conversation. I'm definitely looking forward to learning more. Thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate you tuning in today. And there's some really good resources that we're going to be sharing closer to the end so that you can learn how to leverage your own audience, your newsletters, your overall brand to monetize your business, whether through sponsorships or through affiliate links, which I am a huge fan of and definitely have tons of resources on that. Okay. Now, one of the questions I have was, what are sponsorship folks looking for? And for those people who are considering themselves indie podcasters, maybe they're a podcast producing or editing agency, what are they looking for in terms of your downloads, your stats, your demographics? What should you be including? You've mentioned this media kit thing. What should be included in that? And if people already have that media kit, how can they tweak it and improve it to actually land more revenue?
Yes. So sponsors, brands are looking to see if you would be a great fit as a marketing arm and a marketing extension for their brand to be able to reach the audience. With that being said, it's all about trying to figure out what the goals of working together would be. Number one, a lot of brands are just looking for brand awareness, meaning that they just want to spread the word. If 1,000 more people knew that we existed, awesome. It doesn't necessarily need to lead to sales, but just for them to know that we exist is huge. So that's a brand awareness campaign. There are also more campaigns for in terms of conversions where they're actually wanting to see sales at the end of this campaign, meaning that they're going to be asking you, okay, well, how many people purchased this or how many people bought using your link? That's more of a conversion campaign. And then the other type of campaign also is sometimes brands are not even looking to use your platform. They're actually hiring you to create content on their behalf that they can post on their behalf. So there are 3 different types of goals that typically brands have. And our goal is to try to figure out which of the 3 that they're trying to achieve and how can we best help them do that with our content, with our podcasts, with our platforms. So generally speaking, now you mentioned Media Kit. Media Kit is simply a document. It's going to really detail and explain everything about your brand, including the qualitative information like about you, about your show, when you started, and all those things like that. And then qualitative data, including your statistics. Who are you reaching? What do they enjoy? Where do they hang out? What are your follower count? What's your engagement rate? All of these things are more quantitative data, and both of them matter, right? They want to know who you serve, but also nitty gritty, like more details about them. Are they from the US versus the UK versus Australia? So there's quite a bit of elements. And we're going to be talking about this, but in our 2023 podcast planner, there's probably over like 15 to 20 different things that you can include in your media kits, provide them a very complete, comprehensive view of your brand. For me personally, the goal of my media kit is to really, again, showcase who my brand is for and what I do. And for the brand who I want to work with to know, okay, is this a good fit for me or is this not a good fit for me? Meaning, about my podcast and me as a host. So after I submit my media kit, it's most likely, hey, can we hop on a phone call and talk about what it looks like? Or, you know what? This doesn't sound like a good fit. So it really helps them decide yes or no in terms of moving on to the next step. Some things to consider, like we mentioned before, you have your average podcast downloads because that's very tailored to be like, okay, this is realistic view of what my average episode is going, like how many people my average episode is going to reach. But also if you're planning on including, for example, any Instagram reels or TikToks or any social posts inside of your proposals with these brands, you want to include the engagement rate of your audience. Okay. This is very helpful because this will let them know on an average, I'll get, let's say, 2% of my audience to actually go and click and check this out. So this again is painting a very vivid picture. And these are things I've learned through the hard way, because brands would ask me these questions and I'd be like, oh shoot, I don't know the answer to this. Let me go and dig up and try to figure out all of this information. Other things that I think is really important in your media kit is the topics discussed section. So this allows for brevity in terms of, hey, here are the 5 major topics I talk about. So if they glossed over, they can still get a good overview or a gist of what your podcast and show is all about. Other things that I think are really cool to includes your accolades and any awards. So if you were an award-winning podcast, if you won any grants, if you were featured in any prestigious publications or outlets, include those in your media kit as well. This is your chance to really shine and brag on yourself a little bit. So I'll pause there.
Yes, there's so many good things that you highlighted there, and I've been just taking some vivid notes here so that I can share all of these different resources. So we talked about how important it is to look at the demographics and to decide how the actual sponsor might look at a campaign. So campaign could be a set of your podcast. It could also include a variety of different deliverables. It could include the ability for you to write out a blog post, maybe have a newsletter sponsor. There could be different price points. And I think that's really important that you've mentioned that you're kind of just sharing with people what's the actual strategy that they're trying to reach the audience with. Are they looking for more brand awareness? Are they looking specifically for signups, for sales? What's the actual goal that we want to help people with? And so we want to think about ways that that's actually going to be helpful and going to support the overall goals. So definitely very, very important, Danielle. I really love the thoughts that you shared. Now, I do have a couple more questions. If you have any questions, do drop us a comment. I know I had Saskia reach out and share that they were appreciating this. We have some other things that we definitely want to showcase today. And that is definitely what we're going to do. We're going to give you some resources at the end of this training. But before I kind of talk a little bit more about that, I do have some questions about prepping your sponsorship pitch, because there's a lot of people out there, myself included, who maybe wants to pitch somebody for a sponsorship package, but they're just trying to say, okay, what exactly do I need? What are the things that they are going to look at in terms of like assets, right? Because we talked about the media kit. We also talked about, the types of campaigns, the average downloads, the statistics, all those really important numbers. So I'm going to actually bring Danielle back up here, and I'm going to just talk a little bit more about that. Danielle, can you tell me a little bit more about prepping your sponsorship pitch? Because some people might be looking at what do they need to prepare for this pitch?
Yes, I think what's important for your pitch not only is introducing yourself and your show and who you serve, but also to share your angle. And I call this your story angle, meaning what would it look like to work with you? And what ideas do you have to share with the brand? Instead of just saying, hey, I'd love to work with you and leaving it open-ended, I prefer to take a very narrowed approach and say, hey, I had this awesome idea that I'd like to work and partner with you on to help promote and grow your business. And from there, we can have a conversation based off of that point, meaning, hey, I really like this angle. Let's move forward with it. Or, you know what, that's not really a priority for me right now, but can you come back to me in a year or 6 months? Or, hey, instead of this, let's talk about this. So it's a conversation starter. And a lot of what I'm doing when I'm putting these pitches together is figuring out, okay, what is missing in terms of the brand? What are they talking about right now on social media? What's missing? What do I see that, oh, I'd really like to see this? For example, I'm a travel and personal finance podcaster. And now that I have a baby, an 8-month-old, I'm always thinking about, okay, if me and my son come to this destination, Am I going to be struggling with a stroller? So I have mommy brain and family brain now. So all of the questions I have when I'm looking at like a tourism board's website is about family friendliness and accessibility. So that's probably going to be the angle that I pursue, because I'm like, hey, I noticed that you don't talk about these things on your site, or it's not very prominent for families. So let's work together on this campaign. So one angle you can take is what they're not doing right now. So you can introduce that and say, hey, I noticed that you're not really mentioning this on your social media, or in your content. So what would it look like for us to work on a campaign that looks like that? Another type of pitch can include ideas in terms of what they're already working on. So maybe you want to continue to enhance what they're already doing and add to the conversation there. So it really just depends on, do you want to introduce a topic that maybe they haven't considered, or do you want to help them pursue more of what they're doing already? However, at the end of the day, I always leave the pitch open-ended. So it's like, hey, even if this doesn't sound like a good fit, like, is there anything else coming down the pike? A lot of brands have budgets that are annual, and it's not always calendar year. So some brands will have new marketing dollars in January, but sometimes it's in July or in June. So knowing things like that, those nitty-gritty details, are really, really helpful too when pitching, because then I could be like, okay, I know this brand's budget starts in July. I really should be trying to reach out maybe like in May or April with some campaign ideas.
Yes, I love it. So there are a lot of different things that you should be preparing, like you said, Danielle, for your sponsorship pitch. Getting the insight on the ground about what people are working on. If you have some inside knowledge about when those new marketing budgets roll out, that's super awesome as well. But even if you don't have that inside information, just having some campaign ideas put together, and like Danielle said, looking at your unique angle, right? Because Danielle has a really great story about her family, lots of fun, beautiful travel photos and videos. And what I really love about it is she just brings her unique self to a lot of these. And if you're a course creator and you're thinking, well, I don't really want to do these big brand sponsorships, well, maybe you actually have a client or a student inside of your group coaching program that you might want to approach and say, hey, I really love what you're doing. Would you be interested in an affiliate relationship where I can actually get a special VIP referral pricing on promoting your product? Could I do something where maybe you sponsor my next summit? Recently, I've seen this very commonly in the online virtual summit spaces, where not only are people trying to get people to sign up for the summit, but I'm seeing more and more summits actually have sponsors. And whether that's a technology or maybe it's actually another service provider. So I think that if we're only thinking about brands in the sense that we're looking for brand partnerships and creative content, we're not really thinking about how unique and diverse the types of connections and partnerships that you can create. So there's so many different ways and so many different brands that are looking for more visibility, and it doesn't have to be the same um, drag and drop, copy paste template, boilerplate package for everyone. There's a lot of different things that you want to consider. So Danielle, we talked about a little bit earlier about pricing, and one of the things that we talked about was your unique pitch process and finding a unique pitch process. In terms of when you do send out that pitch, do you have a proposal already set up? Is it going to be a set pricing package, or do you find that it's better to kind of find a unique pricing or ask them about the budget? The topic of money is kind of little bit something you just don't know how to always approach. So what's your best take on finding a good way to have a pricing conversation?
Yes, I think it's very important to have the pricing conversation. I just actually got a brand reach out to me, and they're like, hey, we really want to work with you. And of course, I'm excited to work with them, but I say, hey, listen, I just want to be upfront that there is an investment requirement, so it's important to be able to communicate, yes, that there is going to be an upfront investment requirement for moving forward with a sponsorship. However, when I am pitching brands, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. For example, my sponsorship coach, my mentor, I love very, very much. I'm not going to say his name just because I just don't want to put him out there. But his strategy, I feel like, is not necessarily, at least for podcasters, I prefer is to not include the rate there. It's for me, the pitch is really to spark ideas because, like I said, in my industry, a lot of these destinations and travel brands, they have an interest to work with podcasters, but they've never done it before. So for me to put a rate on what I want to do just doesn't make sense there because they're still nurturing. They're still like, you know, talking about what a campaign would look like. I don't think podcasters are at that point yet, at least in the travel industry, where, okay, putting your rate is advantageous. What I do, however, though, is say, okay, like, would you like to hop on a phone call? Or is this even of interest? If it is of interest, then I could say, okay, what's your budget? Sometimes they say, hey, I don't really know. I don't really have a budget in mind. So you're going to have to kind of come up with numbers yourself. But again, there are, people out there who do put their rates up front and they say, hey, I want to do this in XYZ and this is how much it costs. But for me, it's just, again, like, I don't really know what the campaign is going to look like. I'm just sharing ideas of what I have in mind. And based off the conversation with the brand, we could really fine tune like what they're looking for. Again, those campaign objectives. And then from there, I can say, okay, this is how much it's going to cost for us to reach that goal. So that's my personal approach. But again, you have to do what feels right for you. There are people who are making hand over fist doing the other method. But for me, as a small indie podcaster, I really just want to understand what the brand is looking for before I send out any rates or put it in my proposal.
Yeah, and the rates are really just something that you will be either aware of, that there's a something that you feel confident actually charging. But I think that, like you said, you start out with the conversation. What is their goal? What is it that people want to accomplish? What is the overall strategy, and how does your podcast fit into their overall goals? So a lot of times when people are looking at rate sheets, what they're not really looking at is, okay, here's just this rate. What they're evaluating is, how is this package going to help move the needle forward in a meaningful way for the business overall, whether that's through a small business or a larger company who maybe has higher dollars and revenue. So it's going to be different for each company. And I love that you said it starts with that conversation and deciding that. I do want to kind of talk a little bit more about some resources that Danielle and I actually put together, specifically as it relates to growing a profitable podcast in 2022 and the 2023 season. I'm actually going to show you a little bit more about our 2023 podcast planner. This is something that both Danielle and I have actually put together. This actually shares specifically how you can organize your podcast publicity and produce a profitable podcast time and time again with 12 plus months of planning, spreadsheets, and templates. There's a lot of different resources inside here. I just showed a couple of them, Danielle, but some really great feedback that we've received. We've actually helped support over 300 plus podcasters since 2020 produce and publish profitable podcasts with our proven templatized system. You can see here that there are several different folks that have actually grabbed the planner, and both Danielle and I have put together this templatized system not only for people who are establishing their podcast, but also people who have an established podcast that are looking to diversify their revenue streams into the new year. You can see here that these are just a few snapshots, but we have had hundreds of people grab this system over the last few years. Danielle, do you have any thoughts on our latest 2023 podcast planner?
Yes, I am so excited for this year's planner. We knew every year, let me just take a step back. Every year, Melody and I, this is our third year. So every year we come with an angle. We're trying to solve a specific problem and it's a theme. So last year, for example, our theme was all on productivity and just helping podcasters keep productive and not pod fade and keep going. For this year, because I've been leaning into sponsorships and really making podcasting a serious and important part of my business, I really wanted to alongside Melody, put together a bundle of resources that will help folks make more money. Also, like we've mentioned, this whole conversation is how sometimes difficult it is as indie podcasters. I started podcasting in my closet, so it's very difficult for us to make money in terms of like 5 figures, 4 figures, 5 figures as podcasters without having a strategy in place. And it's taken me years to get to this point. But I felt confident enough to be like, okay, these are the resources that are helpful. For example, our media kit checklist. I've seen hundreds of media kits as a podcast marketing coach, being part of Women of Color Podcasters. I've seen a variety of media kits that some had great elements, some had not so great elements, and then including my own personal experience, all of these back and forth conversations with brands of saying, hey, here are these almost 20 items of things that you can include to tell a complete and comprehensive story for your media kit. Another part that's really big for me is my trackers. So I have an affiliate links tracker, and I'll let you talk about that, Melody. Also a sponsorship tracker to keep track of all the brands I have on my radar who I want to work with and where things are in the process. Have I followed up with them 1, 2, 3 times? It could be very difficult to kind of stay organized. So these are the systems and tools and resources that we've used in our businesses over the last 2+ years. And now we're sharing it confidently in the 2023 podcast planner. One of my favorite assets that I really think is going to help change the game for a lot of us indies is the 8 swipe files, the 8 email templates that you can outreach to brands. And this was actually really difficult to come up with because originally when I was talking to Melody about it, I was like, I'd love for these templates to be in there, but I literally custom pitch every single template. And I wasn't necessarily sure if there was a way that I can actually do this, meaning can I just kind of create like a grab and go thing for folks? And I started looking at all of my successful winning pitches over the last 2 years, and I started to see some themes and some commonalities. So these templates in the 2023 podcast planner are straight from my inbox. They're straight from campaigns that have won, that I landed the contract, I landed the deal, and I think that's important for folks to have a starting point. Like I said, I struggled for so long with what to say, how to say. So we've taken the 8 most common scenarios. For example, if you're cold pitching a brand, or if a brand wants to work with you, but only through an affiliate relationship, what can you say? What do you say? And how do you say it to move forward and not, feel weird or anything like that? So overall, those are the highlights. But again, it's taking us a while to get to this point to be able to provide these resources. They're battle tested, they're proven, they're winning. And my hope is that you'll be able to grab these and make real progress, either this year, 2023, or whenever you are ready to monetize with sponsorships or affiliate revenue.
Absolutely. I love this. And I'm going to actually show my screen a little bit, Danielle, of what's included when you actually join. So there's a lot of different templatized systems in here. I'm actually going to show you a little peek behind the scenes. Won't go too much into detail because we have another full video on that, but take a look at how easy and simple this is. You have a profitable way to produce your podcast, publish your podcast. And Danielle actually created something that is this downloads tracker. It's really awesome because you can track all the effective work that you're doing, seeing what's working to grow your listenership and also your audience members for your group coaching program, your membership, and looking for ways to diversify that revenue into your business. Also, I want to talk a little bit more about the affiliate links. I actually have a good chunk of change. Recently, I was doing some bookkeeping work and I noticed that I had a lot of different affiliate revenue income coming from different places. And it was actually really interesting for me to see, oh, this income is actually pretty consistent. I should really go back and create a new campaign into the new year. Or I really need to remind people about this link because I do actually see sales coming from it. So having a simple way to track your affiliate sales for all the software that you use, maybe some colleagues or other people that you know in your industry that offer a complimentary digital product or course, go back to that because you could be leaving money on the table if you're not having a way to actually share the unique affiliate links. The other thing you're going to notice is that once you actually join, you're going to access the products specifically through our online dashboard. So it's very simple. You'll get access to these email swipe files that Danielle was talking about, which is all about sponsorship. So you want to head over to yourpodcastplanners.com. It's on sale at this present time, but even if it's not, it's still a good deal, especially if you're looking for the words to say, you're not exactly sure how to actually approach that conversation. Super useful. You also have access to this media kit checklist, which is super handy, and it gives you the ability to know exactly how to create that media kit, even if you don't know all the moving pieces. This is especially true if you're looking to expand your specific audience into looking at a different way to monetize, like a paid speaking engagement. And if you're thinking, hey, I really just want somebody to design this for me, the good news is we actually have something for you, and it's only $7 at checkout at the time of this recording, but it's still a good deal. Even if you grab it after that, you can take a look at this beautiful Canva template. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit here so you can see more. Podcast reviews, drag and drop. I mean, we have some people that are already taking action and filling this out, and they know exactly how to customize this. And just like Danielle was saying, you might have a rate sheet or you might not. You might have something just here that says book a call. You can customize this to your podcast cover art. You can also create a way for you to represent the different brands that you worked with or companies that have sponsored past episodes, or maybe even a newsletter or a summit. There's truly a lot of different ways to diversify your revenue and income stream. So again, like I mentioned, head on over to yourpodcastplanners.com. Like I said, we do have this special 2023 podcast planner on a unique special Black Friday Cyber Week sale, and you'll get to grab it through the end of the week at a special price, but it's still a fabulous resource for you to check out. So many different resources to monetize. Danielle, I just talked a lot. I just want to ask you any remaining thoughts on getting sponsors and monetizing your revenue for your podcast then at the end of this year and into next year?
Yeah, something I always tell my clients is that your podcast is way more than the audio file. It's way more than the RSS feed. If we start to see our podcast as our brand, meaning how we present ourselves on social media, our newsletters, our websites, right? If we start to see as more comprehensiveness, we're able to lean into our strengths, position ourselves even better for these brand deals and sponsorships in the future. Also, one thing that I can say is after this conversation or just thinking about how much effort and energy, you may say to yourself, you know what, like I don't want to be like Danielle, hustling every once a week, having a pitch day and sending out pitches. I want brands to reach out to me. And that's totally fine as well. But a lot of times when the brands reach out to you, they'll still ask questions like, where's your media kit? Can I see your media kit? So even if you're not necessarily into pitching and you don't necessarily need the email swipe files that we put together, your media kit, the checklist coupled with the beautifully designed Canva template that Melody put together will prepare you for that. I think that's very important for us to be ready for success, right? So we're not scrambling with it when a brand does come and reach out to us. We're prepared. Your media kit, for example, is digital asset that is like your resume, right? Like people say to keep your resume or your LinkedIn profile updated. So even if you're taking that stance and you're like, I don't want to pitch, I want brands to reach out to me, they will ask for a media kit and you will be prepared. So that's my overall. I'm really excited. I love to see more indie podcasters, whether you are a course creator, a coach, whether you are like me, a travel podcaster and a personal finance podcaster, but really thinking about monetization because podcasting is a grind. It's a lot of work and it's okay for us to want to make money and take care of the bills and feed our families, right? I had a client that said to me the other day, like, I don't want sponsorship to drain the fun out of podcasting. And for me personally, I feel like sponsorships has helped me remain sustainable and it's also improved the quality of my show because now I have a brand who actually wants to use the episodes and showcase it on their website. I have a brand who is sort of like my accountability buddy too, right? Like I want to show up for them. I want to do a good job for them and my audience. So I think that it has opened and unlocked a new realm for me of really falling in love with podcasting and seeing my audience as my clients, of course, because I want to serve them, serve myself, and also serve the brands I want to work with. So those are my thoughts. I really hope that you'll grab the 2023 podcast planner and get started on your profitability plan. And if you have any questions, I'm over on all the platforms, but especially LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, would love to connect with you, Danielle Desir Corbett.
Yes, thank you so much, Danielle. And as you have been watching, please feel free to check out the yourpodcastplanners.com. We have these sorts of templates available to you for the 2023 podcast planner. But we also have some new exciting things that will be pushing out into the new year. So make sure that you grab this template and stay on our newsletter because we've got some new things coming up. In fact, Danielle and I have been friends for several years, and we've been talking about this for a long time. And we've said this is something that has actually superseded our existing brands. So we need to create a space for podcast planners everywhere so they can grow their revenue and produce their podcasts more sustainably. So I'm really excited for you to check out that podcast planner. Head on over to yourpodcastplanners.com. You'll be able to grab that specially for Black Friday offer and the Cyber Monday week. We would love for your support. Anything that you have questions on, do feel free to drop a comment, #replay. We'll definitely make sure that we follow up with your questions. Other than that, thanks so much for watching, friends. It's been great chatting. That's it for today's session. If you have any questions about how to grow your recurring revenue with referrals and retention, don't hesitate to reach out. The best place for you to check out my resources, my free trainings, and everything else is on my website, www.thecourseconsultant.com. But I'm here to answer questions, help you find the best tools, resources, and trainings to grow your online business for your coaching, memberships, and group coaching programs. Thanks so much for watching. That's it for today's session. Chat soon.